The Eastern Caribbean prepares for Tropical Storm Dorian to make landfall. Chile declares an agricultural emergency in 17 areas as the worst drought in decades takes its toll. And Lebanon calls on the international community to reject Israeli aggression as the funeral for 2 men killed by a drone strike is held. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. Tropical Storm Dorian has formed to the east of the Caribbean and is barreling towards a group of islands called the Lesser Antilles. The center of the storm is expected to pass close to Barbados on Monday night into Tuesday morning before heading towards Puerto Rico. A tropical storm warning is in place for Barbados, St. Lucia and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Dorian is the 4th named tropical system of the 2019 Atlantic hurricane season. Meanwhile, Liat Airlines and Caribbean Airlines have both been forced to cancel numerous flights due to Tropical Storm Dorian. All flights leaving or arriving to the islands that will be most affected have been cancelled for this Monday. This includes all flights to or from Barbados, St. Lucia and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Liat passengers will be allowed to rebook between August 25th to August 28th, with all change fees and fare differences waived within the specified booking period. CAL passengers who intended to travel between August 26th to 28th will be allowed to rebook without change fees as well. Prime Minister Mottley, after visiting several communities, is now monitoring storm-related developments from the Situation Room at the Barbados Defense Force base. As the island gets ready for Dorian's impact, Mottley says she has received a number of sectoral updates in areas of health, tourism, security, preparedness and water. This during discussions with the relevant ministers, the Acting Attorney General, the Defense Force's Chief of Staff and other high-level military officials. Our correspondent, Kareem Smith, is on the ground in Barbados with more details.
We're just hours away from the passage of Tropical Storm Dorian here in Barbados, and so far things are relatively calm. We've seen a bit of wind, a few drizzles, and the sky is beginning to get very overcast at this time. And we're also about 2 hours past the national shutdown time away from here, and I've just recently got back from some of the busy streets and some of the towns, and it is still very much pandemonium outside. Boat owners are still trying to get their boats out of the ocean. Supermarkets are very full, gas station lines are backed up, and it's all in preparation for Dorian, which is about 200 miles east-southeast of Barbados, and it's moving westward slowly and coming closer to the island. It's expected to pass just south of the island. Now, yesterday, Prime Minister Mottley gave an extended address to the nation in which she warned that we should take no chances here in Barbados with the passage of this tropical storm. She has asked that people stay out of the streets. She's asked that the Barbados Defense Force, the police force, and all of the other emergency personnel start to get serious about this storm before it comes. And so far, Barbadians have taken that very seriously, but there's some who have been a bit last minute, and they're now trying to just get things in order. We expect to see Dorian passing through at about 7 or 8 p.m., which is about 6 or 7 hours from now. And we'll keep you posted on the passage of Tropical Storm Dorian.
That was Kareem Smith with that report. In other news, thousands of fires in the Amazon rainforest have now been raging for 22 days, with those ravaging the Brazilian Amazon showing no sign of slowing down. The slow response by the Brazilian government has been condemned internationally. Our correspondent Brian Meir is in the state of Rondônia, which has been devastated by the fires.
I'm in Porto Velho, the capital of the Brazilian state of Rondônia, where smoke has completely engulfed the city. This morning when I woke up, I couldn't even see the Madeira River 200 meters from my hotel. It rained a little bit last night, but it wasn't enough to put out the fires, and it seems as even though the Air Force is here and everything, they're still getting worse. Now, Rondônia is a state that was completely taken over by ranchers and soy farmers over the course of the last 30 years. The political apparatus is completely dominated by the powerful ruralista bloc of lobbyists. And The only land that's left that still has virgin rainforest in the state, basically, are on these indigenous reservations, and that's why they're burning right now. I was speaking with a liberation theology priest who's been working with indigenous groups in the region for 40 years, and he told me that there's a reservation near Porto Velho where the ranchers have come in and they've just divided up the land among themselves. There's about 500 of them, and they're just burning everything down. Now there's two tribes that lived deep in the jungle on this reservation that had almost no contact with outsiders. They were still living in their traditional ways. And he tells me that for the last 2 months, nobody's seen them, and he's worried that the ranchers have just killed them all. The Brazilian Air Force has come into Rondônia to try to put out fires this weekend, but thousands of them are still raging out of control. According to the fire department, in the 6 counties where the most fires are taking place, the number has risen by 193% this year. Local journalist Luciana Oliveira snuck into an indigenous reservation this Sunday to see what was happening for herself.
It's hard to breathe. It's really hot, but the worst thing is seeing it.
After far-right President Jair Bolsonaro gutted the environmental agencies, big ranchers moved in and are parceling out land inside indigenous reservations and burning it down.
We warned everyone that this was going to happen. We say that President Bolsonaro's rhetoric would pull a mental trigger. He gave the order when he relativized the issue of environmental crimes, when he discredited the work of environmental protection agencies, when he ridiculed the fines, when he gave an order, he said, do it.
It doesn't appear that Rondônia's governor, a former military police colonel from Bolsonaro's PSL party, is giving any signs that he will punish the illegal ranchers.
Watching the forest burn, hearing the branches cracking from the fire and the soil turning black is terrifying.
Bolsonaro recently announced that he'll pardon more than $4 billion in income tax for the big ranchers and farmers who have a major influence on his government. Brian Muir, Telesur, Porto Velho.
Wildfires have restarted in Paraguay's Amazon region, not long after authorities had managed to put out a number of them. The president traveled to the Bahia Negra region in order to oversee firefighting efforts. Osvaldo Zayas reports.
A government delegation led by President Mario Abdo Benitez arrived in Bahia Negra, where Paraguay's wetlands are located. The president announced the country will receive aid from the European Union, which offered planes that should arrive in the next few days. Firefighters also arrived in the early hours and traveled to the Tres Gigantes reservation, where fires continue to rage. The Minister for National Emergencies, Joaquin Ruano, announced that the government will use all the tools at its disposal to put out the fires. He also said he spoke to Bolivian President Evo Morales to join forces in this fight. Ruano said they are looking into the causes of the fires, if campesinos burned land or if security protocols weren't followed. Close to 41,000 hectares of forests were affected in the Paraguayan Chaco. Dry winds from the north, on top of an ongoing drought, have restarted wildfires in the Tres Gigantes Forest Reserve. On top of this, the wetland region is increasingly being threatened.
We are seeing small hot spots appearing throughout Paraguay's wetlands, and conditions are primed for the spread of fires. Humidity is low. There's a lot of dry vegetation and high winds.
Paraguay shares a border with both Bolivia and Brazil, as well as the largest tropical wetland region in the world. In this area, close to 21,000 hectares of forest have already been consumed.
This particular region is called the Palmar Savanna. This ecosystem is usually full of life, but now it's been suffering from a drought, which is being made worse due to the fires.
The Guira Paraguay Association, which is in charge of the Tres Gigantes Forest Reserve, continues to monitor the damage caused to the region.
We are doing daily monitoring of areas that are in high danger of fires. The drought season extends through July, August and September.
Meanwhile, the National Emergency Ministry set an operation center where authorities are organizing all efforts to put out the growing hotspots.
Still to come, violence escalates as yet another social leader is killed in Colombia. Don't go away. Welcome back. An agricultural emergency has been declared in 17 areas of central Chile as the worst drought in decades affects the region. Our correspondent in Santiago, Paula Dragnik, has the details.
The Mapuche community, specialists and social movements have warned of an imminent water crisis in Chile for years. The government has finally recognized the crisis, declaring an agriculture emergency in 17 areas in the center of the country, assigning resources to animal needs and sending water in vans. However, they haven't said anything about the waters law, which has meant the privatization of water in Chile, putting it in the hands of mining and big agriculture businesses. This water crisis was predicted years ago, and dozens of towns across the country are completely without water. This year, the government has been making some efforts to counter the problem, but only to assist, rather than change the law that has allowed the little water left as a consequence of climate change to stay in private hands.
That was Paula Dragnik with that report. Another social leader has been killed in Colombia. Danilo Olaya Perdomo was president of the Vereda Alto Cachaya Community Action Board in the municipality of Gigante. The community is asking that the case be investigated. He was shot and killed on Saturday night as he arrived to his rural home. Since the start of 2016, over 700 social leaders have been murdered in Colombia. Our correspondent in Bogota, Manuel Jimenez, has more.
The genocide and murder of social and indigenous leaders, as well as human rights defenders in Colombia, isn't stopping. The latest person to be killed is 70-year-old Danilo Olaya Perdomo. He was president of the Vereda Alto Cachaya Community Action Board in the department of Huila, specifically in the town of Gigante. People in the region have said that this is the second leader killed over the last month. They point to the death of Humberto Trujillo, who was also murdered. He was the president of the Guadalupe Community Action Board, also in the town of Gigante. People are demanding an investigation, and that not only those who pulled the trigger are brought to justice, but also those who organised the murder, those who are behind the killing of social leaders in this part of the country. Social organisations and movements are demanding that the national government act to end the murders of social leaders in this region and all across the country. We have to bear in mind that Colombia is preparing for elections, and the latest report by the Electoral Observer Mission suggests extensive political violence, citing 73 social leaders killed between October 27, 2018 and July 27, 2019. This is a situation that isn't slowing down, and it's an explosion point because elections are coming. Many of the victims of this armed conflict are opting for responsibility as a result of the national government's failure to meet its commitments to the peace deal. That deal agreed to create a state-regional policy for peace, truth and justice, as well as reparations for the victims of political violence.
That was Manuel Jimenez with that report. In other news, 32 environmental activists in Honduras have been sued by the Inversiones Pinares mining company. The activists say this is state-backed persecution for opposing the construction of a mine that would destroy their land. Here's more on their case.
After mining company Inversiones Pinares, who stands accused of damaging private property, sued environmental activists, the activists went to the courts to condemn the charges against them and to warn of attempts on their lives.
Justice in this country is manipulated by the government, by transnational companies, and by organized crime. We don't want to be hunted like animals, because the mining company is using their hitmen to execute us.
Lawyers for the activists assure that members of the Huapinol community haven't committed any crime, and that's why they went to court. But once there, they were ignored, as authorities simply gave them numerous baseless excuses.
The public ministry has sued 32 people from Huanipol for opposing a mining project that contaminates the rivers, which is the only source of water they have. They are being sued for defending the river, life and the environment. The persecutor has claimed that these people are felons.
Over 10 years ago, the indigenous and Garifunas communities are being criminalized for opposing the expropriation of their lands, which are then given to hydroelectric and mining projects, without any sort of dialogues or consultation with inhabitants.
Which are the territories and resources they're handing over. They belong to the indigenous people, to our communities, because they are our lands and we have lived in peace with nature. They say that we are against development because we oppose the destruction of forests, because we oppose mining.
While the activists try to make themselves heard, the Special Rapporteur of the United Nations, Diego Sayan, pointed out mistakes found in the implementation of the criminal justice system during his visit to Honduras.
When you talk about judges' independence, we're not talking about the right of judges to resolve cases according to the law and their own judgment, but of the right of the people, of the population, of having a justice system that provides solutions according to the law when they are involved in a case.
The accused activists will now have to wait for a judge to hear their case, but not before being arrested despite their apparent innocence.
Shifting gears now, thousands of people have fled Cameroon's Anglophone regions, fearing a new wave of violent clashes between separatist forces and government troops. More than 40 people were killed over the weekend during clashes between the two groups. The recent violence comes a few days after 10 separatist leaders were sentenced to life imprisonment by a military tribunal. The separatists, who are fighting for an independent state, accuse the Francophone majority government of discriminating against Anglophone regions.
We have just heard that there will be a lockdown, and since the children need to go to school, that's why we are moving down, so that the children can go to school.
What is causing me to go out is about the lockdown that is coming up, and we know that the town will not be too good, so I'm going to Babusam to maybe stay there for a while before coming back.
Dozens of journalists in Guinea have protested against what they say is harassment of private media practitioners by state authorities. The demonstration follows the arrest and detention of 2 journalists on charges of defamation relating to a Facebook post. The protesting journalists said the arrest of their colleagues is an attempt to intimidate them from carrying out their work.
The freedom of the press is threatened, and it looks like they want to silence journalists. Why should we feel threatened while doing our job? We are rebelling against that, and we are standing up before it's too late, because now it's the time to act.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has announced the members of the new coalition government. The announcement comes after 7 months of negotiations following President Felix Tshisekedi's victory over Joseph Kabila in the general election earlier this year. Most members of the new executive have been drawn from the former president's Common Front for Congo party. The DRC will now have a woman vice prime minister, minister for foreign affairs, and minister for planning. January's election resulted in the first peaceful transition of power since the nation gained independence from Belgium in 1960.
The government is finally here. The President of the Republic, the head of state, has finally signed the order. Now that the government has been formed, we'll get to work shortly.
After the break, thousands rally against discrimination in Papua. Don't touch that remote. Welcome back. The funeral of 2 Lebanese men killed by an Israeli attack in Beirut on Sunday has taken place. Israel has reportedly also dropped bombs on Palestine, Syria and Iraq in the last few days, causing regional tensions to rise dramatically. The Lebanese President Michel Aoun said the Israeli strike was a declaration of war and that the country has the right to defend itself. Meanwhile, Lebanon's Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri said that the international community must reject Israel's blatant violation of Lebanese sovereignty. The Secretary General of Hezbollah, Saeed Nasrallah, said on Sunday that the Israeli attack was a breach of the agreement reached by Hezbollah and Israel following a month-long war in 2006.
What happened last night was an attack with a suicide drone on a target in the southern suburbs of Beirut in Lebanon. This is a breach of the rules of engagement established after August 2006 war, the first clear and significant breach.
Thousands staged rallies in several towns in West Papua, Indonesia, against ethnic discrimination and demanding independence. Protesters wore full traditional indigenous regalia, carrying 4 Morning Star flags, which have been banned by the Indonesian government. Protests have become common in Papua and West Papua, but are usually shut down quickly by security forces who regard them as an illegal movement. The resource-rich West Papua was a Dutch colony that was incorporated into Indonesia after a widely criticized United Nations-backed referendum in 1969.
I think the Indonesian President Joko Widodo is misguided that Papuans don't want development, infrastructure or welfare. But Indonesia is a large nation with so many races and tribes and should address the root problem.
Alternative G7 protesters have condemned the world leaders meeting in the French city of Biarritz for hypocrisy as the G7 summit comes to an end. The protesters highlighted a lack of action to combat inequality, pointing to a future free trade deal between the United States and the United Kingdom that could have dramatic consequences for Britain's socialized health sector. They also said that while they promise action, the world leaders provoked the fires in the Amazon rainforest through neoliberal policies and support for mining and other extraction industries, contributing to deforestation in the region.
The French President Emmanuel Macron dared to say the following phrase during the G7 summit: "We have to answer the call of the ocean and the forests that are burning. We are Amazonian." Is this leader a true pyromaniac of the planet who claims to want to stop the fires that they themselves provoke? The massive extraction of fossil fuels, deforestation, agro-industry, pollution of all natural aspects, multinational companies are mainly responsible for this ecological disaster, and the G7 pyromaniacs support them.
As Trinidad and Tobago prepares to celebrate Independence Day on Saturday, members of the public are warned that drones will not be allowed in the capital city. The Ministry of National Security says Port of Spain is a designated no-fly zone with respect to the operation of unmanned aircraft systems. The ministry says the advisory is in keeping with the Civil Aviation Act and Civil Aviation Authority Regulation 19 unmanned aircraft systems, as well as the authority's prohibited and restricted areas. August 31st is TNT's 57th independence anniversary after breaking free from Britain's rule in 1962. And the 14th edition of the Caribbean Festival, known as Carifesta, has come to an end, and host Trinidad and Tobago has been hailed for raising the bar of the event. Carifesta saw 19 countries put their art, history, food and culture on full display. The festival, themed Connect, Share, Invest, ran from August 15th to 26th and cost the Twin Island Republic $43 million. Scores of people from across the country and the Caribbean visited the Grand Market at the Savannah since the start. Speaking at the closing ceremony on Sunday night, Trinidad and Tobago's Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts, Dr. Nian Gatsby-Dolly, described the festival as a cultural supernova. This as she officially passed the torch to host Antigua and Barbuda, who will put on the festival in 2021. Basking in glorious sunshine this Monday, masqueraders littered the streets of West London, decked in colourful feathered costumes for Day 2 of the Notting Hill Carnival. Over 1 million people attended the annual event, which is thought this year to be one of the hottest carnivals ever, with a temperature of 32.7 degrees Celsius confirmed in London on Sunday. The grand finale parade followed the more family-friendly event on Sunday. That brings us to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.